Julia Tuttle was adamant about making it convenient for people from all over the world to get to South Florida. But not only that, she was specifically and importantly adamant about making it convenient to get around South Florida itself, especially if one lived here. As mentioned in the video that I did last year, Julia Tuttle, when she came down to South Florida, she spent lots of time writing letters to people like Henry Plant, the Rockefellers, Henry Flagler. These are all people with big money and the means and resources to bring railroads to South Florida. And these weren't the only individuals that she approached. She approached others as well. Her communication to them, for the most part, was of no avail. Why? Well, there are two reasons, two possible reasons, or probably others, but there are two possible main reasons as to why her requests for a railroad were of no avail. Number one, these individuals obviously knew or had some kind of awareness of the environment of South Florida at the time and didn't think it was possible to actually bring a railroad down here. They thought that was crazy, right? The whole idea of doing that was just absurd, just based on the environment, lots of wetland. Two, she's a woman, right? In the 1800s, in that early times, women weren't expected to make requests as such. But finally, in 1892, there was hope. Henry Plant, who by this time had acquired Sanford's South Florida Railroad, commissioned an expedition. Okay? He commissioned an expedition to see if it was indeed possible to bring a railroad through into South Florida, where Julia Tuttle was. And finally, that brings us to the James Ingraham expedition. Here we are. The James Ingraham expedition took place on March 14th, 1892. Obviously, James Ingraham was not by himself. He had a team of men with him to help him along the way with the expedition. 3 men, including James himself, took very detailed notes of everything they encountered during the expedition. James Ingraham and his team left the Tampa area by boat, and they took on a journey through the Everglades, a dangerous one that will last about a month. One of my favorite anecdotes from their trip, which I read from the notes, talks about how they encountered an alligator, how they had to fight off the alligator, and how they eventually ate the alligator. And this being South Florida, we know that the weather is not always favorable. I mean, imagine being on a little boat, traveling through the Everglades, already dealing with alligators, snakes, and sawgrass, but then having to deal with the unpredictable weather on top of that. And speaking of sawgrass, sawgrass is not a pleasant thing to deal with, especially if you're riding your boat through it. But thanks to the Indians, these group of men were able to learn different techniques to maneuver through different things, like the sawgrass. Here we have a picture of sawgrass in the Everglades in its natural state. Imagine a little boat having to travel through all of this. What's cool about this single strand of sawgrass is that we see the spikes on its side. So this really gives the illusion of a saw. So I guess they do call it sawgrass for a reason. I digress. So for a month, this is all business, no pleasure, going through the Everglades, running into islands. Oh, yeah, that's right. In the Everglades, there are a series of islands. So that brings us to the question, how did they take their breaks? How did they rest? Well, thanks to the islands, they were able to set up camps. Their journey was pretty much like this: ride the boat, take notes, survey, observe, eat, camp, and keep it moving. For food, they rationed the food that they brought, of course, and at times they would hunt when they could and eat what was ever available. However, it wasn't the same as eating at home. So in the food department, they were definitely lacking. And the elements were certainly getting to them. The clothes were tearing up. At times, they wouldn't even wear any shoes. There's a mention in the notes about blisters on their feet. This trip, this journey, this expedition was no easy task.